Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
I was reading one author who said that one of the things that children do for us is call us into their world and sort of release the child in us.
Today on Reflections, Father Bacik talks with Dr. David Doan, a psychologist from Maumee, Ohio. The topic of this week's Reflections is marriage and raising children. And now, here is Father Bacik.
Dave, let's talk a little bit about the question of marriage and children. Marriage is a fascinating topic. I find in the theological literature these days there's a whole lot of new emphasis on marriage. I think people are trying to come at it from different perspectives. And one of the things you can see in the literature is that they're trying to take experience more seriously. Very often when theologians have dealt with marriage in the past, it's been done by celibates who are out of touch with what marriage is all about, and in writing in the past in very pessimistic ways about it. And there was a lot of talk of sort of debasing sexuality, and sexuality was simply something that you allowed to happen. And going back to St. Augustine, there were notions that somehow that even sexual intercourse in marriage, if it wasn't for the purpose of procreation, would be a venial sin. It would be connected in with concupiscence. So you had a lot of pessimistic talk about celibates and talking about marriage. And now when you read some of the literature, you see very optimistic talk. You see people talking about sexual intercourse as the epitome of marital bliss and so on. And again, when I talk to married people, they find a lot of that is unrealistic. So as I see the theological world today, there's a movement to say, well, we got to listen to married people. We have to get married people to describe their experiences and to tell us more about how they find God in their married life, and how the family reveals the presence of the Spirit for them. And I think that's a big advance, and we're going to see a lot of fruit from this sort of new approach to theology. But it's at a very beginning stage, and I think that one of the things we want to encourage people to do is to reflect on their own experience within marriage and try to see maybe how God can be found there, and how they can come closer to Christ as a result of being married. Now, for many people, that certainly centers in on children, and that's really where I wanted to go with all of this, children being a crucial part. And I think for many people, brings them their deepest religious experiences. You want to begin to comment at all on any of that I said about you certainly talk to people with all kind of experience, and you yourself have experience as a married man. You want to comment at all on that, about the way theology might deal with that? Or
I think that one more aspect to that shift, that positive shift that you alluded to, is that parents, I think, used to think more about children in terms of what they're doing for their children, and there has been more of a shift in the direction of what the children are doing for the parents. The enriching of life and of marriage and of individual, each of the individuals by way of having the children.
That reminds me of what Jesus said, that we were supposed to learn from the little children. I always like that vignette in the Gospels where the disciples are trying to keep the little children away from Jesus, and he says, don't hinder them, let them come to me, and he holds them and touches them and so on. And Jesus' whole effort to point out that we can learn from the children. They tell us something about the kingdom. And that's not always clear exactly what we're supposed to learn from them, but it seems to me it fits into what you're saying. Maybe that's the point to be said. What do parents learn from children? I know when at times of baptism, one of the points I often stress is that parents learn something from the children about patience and faithful love even when there isn't feedback. Because it seems to me at the infancy stage, I mean, while you might like it that the child coos or seems to smile and so on, that there is not a lot of feedback as we would know it as adults, and therefore one is called to be faithful to love and be a caring, nourishing person, even when it isn't mutual, in which they're not giving back to one. So, and one learns, it seems to me, a lot about patience in dealing with that kind of situation. The children don't do what you want them to do. They're out of line. They try your patience, as we say. Teach us the value of trying to remain calm in the midst of often very stressful situations.
And they also teach us a lot about living and loving and spontaneity, and honesty, directness.
You want to expand on any of those? The spontaneity one intrigues me. Children are so spontaneous and don't get programmed and just do sometimes things that surprise us and bring delight and joy.
Well, I have a 5-year-old at home, and it was joy to watch her open Christmas presents, and she was real quick to make it known whether she liked or didn't like a particular present. You know, if she was given a dress, she's very quick to say, "Oh, that's not my favorite color," and how an adult would be prone to take it and say thank you, even though he really doesn't want the gift. You know, and just adults hold so much more inside in an effort to be tactful or an effort to be polite. But I think we can learn a lot from kids about being direct, and being direct in a non-hurtful kind of way, because kids seem to be able to be direct often in a non-hurtful kind of way, because it's just a simple honesty.
That spontaneity is wonderful. I was doing the Christmas Mass. It was a children's Mass, and we had all of the children do the parts of the Mass. So they did the readings and the prayer of the faithful and did a meditation after communion and so on, and they brought up gifts at the offertory. The whole theme was to get them to recognize that there's gift-giving connected with Christmas, that's connected in with Christ and the gift of God giving us His Son to the Christ child for our benefit and so on. It was our people arranged it. It was a beautiful sort of celebration. And during the dialogue homily, I was trying to tell the Christmas story and to elicit certain things from them. And at one point, one of the little girls there just stood up and grabbed one of the presents and sort of held it up and showed it to everybody in the congregation. And it was suddenly show and tell time, I guess. And no one had programmed this in. It simply was part of the whole procedure at that point. And she was just very at ease with doing this and so on, uninhibited. And I think it brought a laugh and smiles. And, it had a light moment to it, you know. And it seemed to me to enrich the overall celebration rather than detract from it.
Yeah, I know. Oftentimes I'll have an appointment at the office of a family, and a family will show up without bringing the little 2-year-old or without bringing the little 3-year-old, because they don't want to have an appointment that's disrupted by this little 2 or 3-year-old. And for the second appointment, I'll encourage them to come back with the 3-year-old. And it's such an enormous difference to have the 3-year-old child in the room, both in terms of now you've got the whole family, and in terms of the life and the vitality and the spontaneity that you can see that this child initiates. And you can also see a different side of parents and of everyone else in the family with the presence of that child.
Do you find that as a therapist that you learn important things observing that kind of scene?
Yeah, observing and listening. And if the child is old enough to talk, I am happy to have the child say his observations and perceptions of the family, and preferably even before mother or father have a chance to dominate with their adult viewpoint and give the child a chance to say his own wisdom.
I was reading one author who said that one of the things that children do for us is call us into their world and sort of release the child in us. And, just observing family life again, I mean, I see that very often that, it's as simple as getting down on the floor and being more their height. Or going along with their imaginative scheme. I always notice that kids' voices seems to go up a notch as they move into this imaginative world, and it's sort of fun to go in there with them and if they let you in, I guess, and if to see where they're going with that. I wonder if you find any truth in that idea that it releases the child in us or calls us into their world?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a good thing for all of us adults to do every chance we get. I mean, children, I find, will typically let us in. Now, it's a matter of often we're not very good at getting in because we're so busy and used to being adult in our style, but it's a great thing for every adult to do, to spend some time down on the floor with children, playing with them, wrestling with them, interacting with them. It's expanding. It's expansive for the adult.
Someone has said about adulthood needs to not just totally leave the child behind, but as we become adults, we need to incorporate the child within us into some sort of larger framework. And I think it's often sad when people become humorless or so serious about life that they can no longer be spontaneous or laugh with the children. I mean, that might be a touchstone for whether we're in big trouble or whether we're becoming workaholics or are getting burned out, whether we can really react with the children. I think that's a sad business when that happens, and you see it. I'm thinking, too, the experience they've had in nursing homes and putting daycare centers near nursing homes or combining them, where the children are there and can deal with the older adults, and how enriching that is for the older adults and for the children
and for
as
the
well.
children.
Learn from one another.
Yeah, the two extremes in age benefit a lot from one another.
Children make all the difference, don't they, in a family? I mean, there was a time when you were married and didn't have children, and then you had children. Do you want to comment on that at all? I mean, I remember dealing with couples who, for a while, they were married and they had no children. They wanted children, and quite a while, and the relationship really was getting rocky and difficult, and they were getting on each other's nerves, and they just felt that there was something wrong with all of that. And then when the child came, it just changed everything. You know, they were back on the right, in sync with one another, and the relationship moved in healthy direction. So I'm wondering about that whole experience of being married without children and then having them.
You know, I sure think that having children turns up the activity level in a household and turns up the heat in a household, meaning that. This business of, I think each of us is here to grow, to become all that we can become. And in pursuit of that growth, we become married. A next step to that is the business of having children. And I think children increase the learning, the growing opportunity all the more. They create more spontaneity, they create more chaos, but it's a positive kind of chaos. I think the addition of children, it pushes our limits. You know, you spoke before about trying our patience, and that may be one way in which our limits get pushed. But it's a positive thing that our limits get pushed. I mean, that's how we grow. Our growing edge is expanding, and children add that. In addition to just the joy, the laughter, the play, the invitation that the parents have to play with them, I think that each person, that I can be a better adult for the time that I spend playing with the children.
That's an interesting observation. Again, you're highlighting that sort of spontaneous side of it and the playful side of it. I guess as adults, it's very often to get so programmed into the work schedule and even think of working at marriage that the playful side can be left out. And maybe that's what we need more of in the homes. Maybe that would enrich our marriages if a little bit more time could be spent in non-programmed kind of activities, activity that is not purposeful. That's the real distinction, as I see it, between work and leisure. Work is activity which is programmed and purposeful. Leisure is activity which is not programmed and is purposeless. It has its meaning within itself. In other words, it isn't just that, well, I get something out of playing with the children. It's just good to play with them. There's something joyful, delightful in itself. And that teaches us, I think, about a whole dimension of life that we're in danger of losing, this leisure side of things. And I believe that we really could learn. Maybe that's part of what Jesus wanted us to learn from the children.
Be more like the little children.
Yeah. And that's how you get to the kingdom of heaven. That's what the kingdom of heaven is made of. Maybe telling us that there is more this contemplative side to life, leisure side to life that we ought not lose sight of.
Yeah, and I think each of us needs more of that leisure time. Maybe especially men, but adults in general. Their life is so busy, and we get so goal-directed and so practical, and each of us needs more time to be goalless and purposeless, and children are just a wonderful opportunity to keep that alive in us.
I'm thinking again of baptism ceremonies and the sort of spontaneous blessings I often give to parents at that time. And one of the words that comes to me easily is that I'm praying that there sort of is a quiet satisfaction and delight, and that they will find their deepest joys in being good parents. And the baptismal ceremony talks about the father and the mother being the first of teachers in the child in the way of the faith, and also being the best of teachers. I think it's a marvelous prayer. And then my own sense of it is that to pray at the same time that you'll find your deepest satisfactions in life in carrying out that kind of role, that there will be a joy, sort of a spontaneous joy in all of that. And I think that it tells us something about what is it that we treasure. I mean, most of us, if we think back about what's important to us, it probably is connected in with the children in one way or another. Our own childhood memories, growing up in a family, it's what we carry with us. It sustains us. It, I think, often helps shape our worldview and so on, and brings us a sort of a pure, quiet, deep kind of delight or joy that's different from wild partying or other kinds of pleasures that we know in life.
Yeah, I can also think of a caution that comes to my mind as you're talking about all this. The caution being that husband and wife would not pay enough attention to their own relationship. It's so easy with children to pay attention to the children or focus on the children, even to the extent of avoiding or ignoring one another. And it's so very important for a husband and wife not to let that happen. During good times, just talking about whatever, or when there's problems that need addressing. Rather than ignore them and get close to the children, it's important that husband and wife, mom and dad, work things out between one another. And it's important for the children. I think the most important relationship in any family is that relationship between the husband and the wife. And what's best for the children is if the children have a sense of security about that relationship and a sense of belonging to that relationship between mother and father, and not just belonging to mother or not just belonging to father, but belonging to the union between the two of them. And so it's incumbent upon the mother and father to keep that relationship alive and to work at it or play at it.
And for the very benefit of their children.
For the sake of the
children. That's the best way of dealing with the children.
Yep.
I find a lot of times in marriage counseling that in talking about communications, the couple will say that, well, about the only thing we ever talk about with one another is about the children. That is, who's picking them up or who's taking care of this or that, and how we're going to discipline this problem and so on. And I think that the children become almost a buffer between the couple. I mean, the children are an outlet that keeps the couple or allows them to neglect their own relationship. And that really is a very unhealthy development. I think you said that extremely well, and that really is something that needs to be highlighted, that if you're going to be good for your children, you have to be working at the relationship. I was thinking, you know what I flashed on when you were talking about the remark that children sometimes make when a relationship is in trouble. One of the spouses will begin to talk to me and say, you know, I think the kids are beginning to notice. In fact, my little girl asked me the other day if we were going to get divorced or not. Mm-hmm. And we were never talking about divorce. You know, we never said anything about it, but it's in the air, and she probably sees it on television, and she began to sense that there was a problem, and now here she's brings it out, says it right out. Are you going to get divorced? She's now feeling insecure in terms of the relationship. So one of the best things parents do is to keep that for the children, is to keep the relationship healthy.
Yeah, and to talk about it out loud, because kids do pick up on it. Kids know what's going on. Kids know if there's a problem. You might as well talk about it within the family, and talk about it between husband and wife directly. What's known tends to be less scary than what's unknown.
And again, there's a modeling going on here that will be so important for the future. If we want to make progress in our whole culture and society, we're going to have more models for the youngsters growing up of marriages that are real partnerships, in which the couple share duties, in which the father models for his sons a kind of relationship in which he doesn't just dominate or control, but enters into mutuality and equality with his wife. And the girl growing up has to be able to see her mother as a strong person who stands on her own 2 feet and who is a partner in the relationship. They have to sense somehow that there's a friendship bond in the parents, that they enjoy things together, that there's a caring and a delight in doing together. I think the more they see that their parents are really involved in what we might call a covenant of love that somehow reflects the love of God, that's how we're going to move forward in society. In other words, I don't see how we're going to form better marriages that are real mutual partnerships and passionate love affairs unless youngsters begin to see that modeled by their parents. Otherwise, they just get caught back up into the old models of the traditional society and the traditional marriages.
Yeah, and what it becomes necessary for every couple to work on, every husband and wife, is what you're talking about, developing their own individuality and also developing their own togetherness. That those two aspects are both necessary. And I think that a lot of us think that we get either one or the other. That the time for individuality and separateness is prior to being married. And marriage is a time for togetherness, and it's a time when you sacrifice your individuality. And I think that what is really necessary is both. That both individuality, in the sense of being able to stand on one's own 2 feet, being able to express one's feelings, one's opinions, one's wants and needs, both that kind of individuality, being able to hold one's own, and being able to be close are both necessary in a happy marriage. And they really feed one another. I mean, union, togetherness needs individuation and individuality. And individuality needs a union, needs a closeness in order to have the courage to develop one's own individuality.
And as you well pointed out, that is not a successive or chronological thing, like you are individualized before you're married and then you are somehow a composite after that. But that is a attitude, a habit, an orientation that we'd like to carry with us all the time, where relationships really do enhance our growth, our personal growth, and where out of strengths we are able to make the relationships work better, so that there is a sort of reciprocal relationship going on there. I was thinking as you were talking that becomes so crucial for children to see again. And I'm thinking that there's a lot of ways in which that's probably hard to maintain. In raising children, I take it that one of the things you try to do is to have a sort of common front in dealing with them, or a common opinion that that we're going to function this way in the family. That is between the husband and the wife, father and mother. And yet there will be times when there will be disagreements, when you won't agree on what's to be done with the teenager, whether they're should be allowed to go out to this party or not go out to it. And that no doubt creates certain tensions in marriages. But I would think that my solution to that would be that you find as much common ground as you can, that you talk over the differences, and that it become an explicit point, like, well, your father and I don't really agree on this, and so we have to compromise, and on this occasion you're not going to be able to go because of these various reasons, and maybe another time it'll work another way. But how does that sound to you as I'm saying that? It's sort of an upfront approach.
Oh, and the upfront approach sounds just fine. And I think another solution is, and it's just related to what you're saying, is for the parent to more often say, when in doubt, especially as to how to respond to something that a child is saying, to say to the child, well, let's get Dad, and the three of us sit down and discuss this matter. You know, I think those kind of conversations when mother or father will make it a point to include the other spouse, shows the child the importance of the relationship and gives a chance for that united front to develop.
And they begin to learn about dialogue and conversation and compromise right in that setting. As we're talking, I'm thinking about how valuable that home is for the learning environment. I mean, I'm so often struck when I'm doing counseling where a child came out of a poor family situation, abuse, alcoholism, neglect, and so on, and how hard it is, the scar tissue they carry with them. And so often I'm sitting there, I'm so grateful for the family setting that I had and how that modeled so many good things for me and taught me something about realism and acceptance. I suppose that was one of the dominant things that I learned, was something about realistic approaches to life instead of utopian ones, finding out what works. I suppose sort of a hard-headed compromise attitude to life, a certain pragmatism that families have to work. I mean, you got to find some way to keep it going, and to me that's a very valuable lesson. And I suppose we can all look back at our childhood and say, there's dominant kind of strengths that we found in our family that we can latch on to and that we carry with us.
Yeah, it's a powerful initial classroom for each of us, and most of that learning is occurring pre-consciously, by osmosis, by what's happening within the family, and it makes for very profound, deeply ingrained lessons that stay with us for a lifetime. They're hard to change. Those that need changing are hard to change, and the good ones stick with us forever.
Yeah, and as you said, it is the school. It's the place that we learn like that. There's a sort of final point I want to get in here, David, and that is that the children give us hope, too. That they're a source of hope. They're the new generation. The parents have great hopes for their children. They're going to be good basketball players, and they're going to do well in school and master the piano. And somehow, there's a beauty about that. In listening to it, it often sounds a little unrealistic to me, but still, I like to hear it. And I think it brings a certain positive, upbeat approach to family life. And then there's a beautiful hope for the future along that line. Do you want to comment on that at all? You have just a few seconds.
Well, I certainly agree. The hope, the potential, the excitement in every child
radiates from their faces at times.
Yeah,
maybe especially at Christmas time and the celebration times. Well, Dave, we've been talking about marriage and children. I think we tried to focus on a sort of a two-way thing here, that parents give a lot to their children. They have to be sacrificing and caring and attentive and try to draw them in and so on. But on the other hand, the husband and wife, the mother and father, learn so much from the children, especially when they can enter into their world of play and can be spontaneous. And we learn something from the children, again, about a God who loves all of us and tries to keep the child in every one of us alive in new ways.
You've been listening to Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo. Today, Father Bacik talked with Dr. David Doan, a psychologist from Maumee, Ohio. The topic of this week's Reflections was marriage and raising children. If you have any comments on today's show or suggestions for future programs, please write Father James Bacik, Catholic Campus Ministry, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio, 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Commission of the Diocese of Toledo.